today on Ag News Daily.
I do think that come, the first part of 2026, we're going to see a lot of conversation about MAHA in state legislation. And so it is incredibly important to not only be talking to your federal members of Congress, but exceptionally even more so your state House and state Senate individuals.
Well, welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily podcast. It's not really just a podcast anymore, Michelle, is it?
No, we have so many ways where you can connect with us, whether it's on social media or, we're always open to conversations as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things that make Ag News Daily what it is today.
And what a great week. We're short Delaney, so we get to have fun together as we hit these headlines. I know we've got quite a bit of news today, so how about I jump right into it first with weather. First thing, Michelle, we had great weather. A little hot out there at Husker Harvest Days last week, but overall a great trade show season wrap up. I know the Ohio Farm Science Review is wrapping up right now, and it looks like they had a little bit of rainy conditions, but ultimately a pretty good show as well. Temperatures will remain hot across the Midwest this week and into next, with some of those isolated showers developing. We'll see that in the West before they move to the East this weekend. Of course, early next week, we'll watch some slow-moving systems in some areas, particularly out in the West. We could see that heavy rainfall. That moisture may help ease some of those drought conditions and provide relief to that Mississippi River system. It will largely be unfavorable, though, for those maturing crops and harvest progress. We do see those drought concerns continuing to grow in that Mississippi River area. That river continues to drop. In 8 of the past 10 years, the river levels at the Memphis marker have fallen below the low stage. Earlier this week, the river measured nearly 5 feet below that level. NASA soil moisture data shows that most of Mississippi, Ohio, and the Missouri River basins are sitting in the bottom 2 to 10% range at a 16-inch depth. Looking ahead, though, into the end of September and parts of early October, it is shaping up to mirror the end of August and the start of September, according to Eric Snodgrass. That pattern suggests summer-like heat will continue in the central U.S., followed by a shift of building heat in the West, while cooler air will be settling into the East.
Well, harvest is well underway for some producers. The USDA's latest crop conditions report shows slight changes this week, with overall progress close to the 5-year average. Corn is rated 67% good to excellent, down 1% from last week. Development is on pace, with 72% of the crop in the dent stage and 41% mature. Harvest is just getting underway, with 7% completed, according to that report that was released earlier this week. So I feel like we're going to have significant changes to next week. Soybean conditions slipped to 63% good to excellent, also down 1 point from the previous week. About 41% of soybeans are dropping leaves, and 5% have been harvested so far. Meanwhile, spring wheat harvest is 94% completed, right in line with the seasonal average. I know here in Wisconsin, Tanner, the soybeans very much drying off really fast. Corn is as well. Where are you at in Iowa?
Yeah, it's been some of the similar here with the breeze and warm temperatures. Everything's drying down quickly. And we did see, coming from Farm Journal's field agronomist Ken Furry and Missy Bauer, they've been stating here that some growers should consider combining fields at 13% moisture or even higher to avoid yield losses caused by drying down too quickly in these current weather conditions. They're warning that this rapid dry down across the Midwest is causing soybeans to lose moisture faster than expected. The latest drought monitor, like we just discussed, released on September 11th, shows that nearly 1/4 of all soybean acres are facing some extreme dryness or drought. Berry and Bauer caution that waiting too long could leave farmers harvesting beans at lower than desired moisture levels, which could take a significant toll on yields, as most of our listeners are aware.
Well, in the ag policy arena, the Trump administration is weighing whether to provide additional aid to farmers this fall. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said earlier this week on Monday that officials are monitoring markets daily and working with Congress to determine how much support might be needed this fall, stating that at a meeting of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture in Rogers, Arkansas. Senator John Bozeman of Arkansas says he's talking with both colleagues in the administration about what he calls dire circumstances in rural America, adding that everything remains on the table when it comes to farmer assistance. Rollins' comments come as Chinese buyers have yet to purchase U.S. soybeans this season, despite stronger yields compared to last year. Analysts say soybeans are being used as leverage in China's ongoing trade negotiations with the Trump administration. Certainly, we're continuing to talk about week after week. No soybean spots from China yet. What does this mean as farmers harvest those soybeans? Hopefully, some news to come in the weeks ahead.
We're also looking for some news on the corn front. The National Corn Growers Association was joined by 17 other state groups, sending an open letter earlier this week to top Democratic and Republican leaders, urging the passage of the nationwide Consumer and Fuel Retailer Choice Act of 2025. This legislation would expand consumer access to E15, a fuel blend with 15% ethanol, by lifting the summer driving ban. Growers say this could be the fastest way to create new demand for corn at this time when input costs are near record highs and corn prices have fallen to unsustainable lows. The USDA projects this year's corn crop could be the largest on record, further pressuring the already weak marketplace. The groups did stress that higher ethanol blends not only support farmers but also benefit consumers by lowering their fuel costs. It reduces emissions and is cutting the reliance on foreign oil. Corn grower leaders are on Capitol Hill this week, pressing lawmakers to act before the end of the year.
I always find it interesting what ways that commodity groups are trying to really get information out. And I saw that this past week that they used LinkedIn Live for a panel discussion, and there was quite a few people in that room. So really interesting there. And I also saw that the National Pork Producers Council was in Washington, D.C. this week, and they had an interesting setup to connect with lawmakers as well. So a lot of things happening on that ag policy front. But as we look at some trade news, the U.S. and India are stepping up efforts to resolve trade tensions, with two teams of officials meeting in New Delhi this week. India's chief negotiator, Rashish Agrawal, says the talks will help decide the future course of negotiations following last month's U.S. decision to double tariffs on Indian imports to 50%, the highest in Asia, in response to trade barriers and India's continued pressures of Russian oil. Despite those frictions, both sides say discussions have been positive. Leaders from Washington and New Delhi have also signaled closer alignment on ending Russia's war in Ukraine, and negotiators pledged this week to intensify efforts to reach a trade deal quickly.
Yeah, that's some good trade news there for us, at least positive in the direction. We did see some animal news come in here. The Animal Agriculture Alliance has released 2 reports examining the vegan and animal activist movement in the U.S. The major animal activist group's web report shows maps that are strategic, interconnected nature of these organizations, while the radical vegan activism reports highlights trends in extremist activism and intentions of key players in that movement. Hannah Thompson-Weeman, the president and CEO of the Animal Agriculture Alliance, said the animal activist groups and tactics are becoming more extreme. They're putting farmers, ranchers, and food workers, as well as food security, all at risk. They even added that groups that appear moderate share that same core mission: to eliminate animal agriculture and remove a nutrient-dense food group from the menu. The reports show that nearly 1 in 4 extremist attacks target farmers and food workers, with 189 incidents in agriculture and 62 in food service in 2024. This included vandalism, animal theft or release, trespassing, and even arson. The updated Major Animal Activist Groups web also details the financial power that these organizations have, collectively generating more than $865 million annually to fund these anti-animal agricultural campaigns. The report notes the increasing legal collaboration between groups, including efforts to appeal convictions of activists. So good to know we've got a couple of folks here and groups, Michelle, that are paying close attention to the attacks and types and direction, so we can hopefully stay on top of them from our side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to see that report and that group continue to really see what is happening on that front and to have someone do it. Continuing on that animal news, while the USDA reports show the smallest U.S. herd in history in cattle and continuing tightening numbers on feed, analysts predict producers have not experienced the highest cattle prices yet. That's crazy to even think about. The U.S. beef cow herd has fallen into its lowest level since 1962, according to Drover, signaling what could be the bottom of the current cattle cycle. Tight supplies are helping drive the strong price producers they're seeing today. For Troy Rowan, assistant professor at the University of Tennessee, says for calf producers right now, things are as good as they've probably ever been. South Dakota cattleman Ken Odie agrees, but notes that inflation quickly eats into profits, making long-term gains harder to secure. Despite strong prices, the beef industry is not in herd expansion mode. Weber says producers are hesitant to retain heifers because of high costs and economic uncertainty. He's a senior animal protein analysis at Terrain. So what will continue to happen on that cattle front? I know that there are some producers. Why not sell right now? Prices are really good. But it's really that value of family farming. I think that continues to keep it in. So it's just interesting just to see that chatter on social media.
Yeah, staying in the livestock side of things for news, Nebraska officials have confirmed a case of the state's first H5N1 avian flu detection that was found in a dairy herd earlier this week, marking the first known occurrence in the state. The herd was in central Nebraska. Federal labs confirmed the virus is similar to the strain that previously affected a herd in California. Officials say that the cattle are at low risk of death with proper care, and affected herd has been quarantined. The Nebraska State veterinarian, Dr. Roger Dudley, urged producers to review their biosecurity measures and contact a veterinarian if symptoms appear in their herds. Farmers are being asked to watch for decreases in appetite and milk production, clear nasal discharge, loose or tacky feces, dehydration, fever, or signs of lethargy. The state emphasizes early detection and proper care will help prevent further spread. 18 states have reported this in dairy cattle since 2024, with 1,790 total affected herds. The detections dropped sharply over the warm weather months, with no confirmations in more than 30 days. However, the H5N1 outbreaks in poultry have been over the rise in the past few weeks, especially involving some flocks in South and North Dakota. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that, and I'm sure we will get plenty more reports, unfortunately, of where that is found.
Yeah, with Wisconsin being one of the largest dairy states in the nation, we have yet to have H5N1 in our dairy cattle, knock on wood. But to hear some other states that are getting it, what their approach is just continues to be interesting of what this disease means for the industry. But here's a piece of news, more on the consumer news front, but what it means for the cattle industry in one large food chain. McDonald's is making its largest U.S. investment yet in regenerative agriculture. The fast food giant announced a $200 million 7-year commitment to support cattle ranchers adopting conservation practices. The initiative, called the Grassland Resilience and Conservation Initiative, follows similar McDonald's-backed projects on potato farms in Canada and Europe. The company is partnering with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which will oversee and award competitive grants to organizations working directly with ranchers. Some McDonald's suppliers, including Cargill, Golden State Foods, Lopez Foods, OSI, and Coca-Cola, are also contributing funds. The first round of grant awards is expected in January. The company further states in the press release that regenerative agriculture looks like to them rotating cattle to restore grasslands, aiming to conserve water, improving soil health to reduce reliance on synthetic fertilizers. Advocates, including the Fish and Wildlife Foundation, say these practices not only benefit the environment, but also strengthen ranch profitability, noting this new investment. I know we had an interview a few months ago about the carbon market, just so many ways that companies are making investments to farmers. It's just an interesting way that that collaboration is happening.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be more changes, of course, as programs are put into emphasis and others are shut down. We do see agriculture fairs are a major economic driver in the United States, generally nearly $52 billion in economic impact, according to the new report that was released earlier this week from the International Association of Fairs and Expositions. The 2025 Economic Impact Study analyzed 1,400 fairs across the country, highlighting the financial benefits to the local communities that they are in. David Grindle, the president and CEO of the association, told Brownfield that the fairs contribute both directly and indirectly, stating that, look how much money the fair and fairgrounds spend locally, and that the attendees will spend in the community at and around fair time. He said and added that these events really generate year-round income, bringing in tourism dollars and supporting all local businesses. Grindle also stated that notes that the role the fair plays in education and public engagement. More than 60% of Americans attended a fair in 2024, giving them the chance to learn about where their food comes from and connect directly with those in agricultural communities. So a lot of good news there. I think it's nice to have an official study, but makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Were you able to get to a fair this year?
Yes. Yep. Made it to a couple of different fairs. So it's always fun to be able to get the girls out and allow them to connect as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's always ways to have fun in the summer. I can't believe we're in the middle of September. It's fall season. But as we look at oil prices, they're holding steady as producers and consumers work to balance supply and demand. The Organization for Economic Cooperation announced last weekend it will boost oil production in October by about 180,000 barrels a day. Patrick DeHaan with Gas Buddy says the move, along with the U.S. shift to cheaper winter fuel blends, should bring gasoline prices down in the coming weeks. But diesel can move in the opposite direction. DeHaan notes that the harvest season will increase demand for farm equipment and colder weather will drive up heating oil use. Since heating oil and diesel are essentially the same product, that could push diesel prices higher heading into the winter.
Yeah, we will hopefully not have too terrible of a winter, but it seems to be an issue no matter what type of winter we experience here in the Midwest. Excited to get into our interview for this week. Good friend of ours, we're hearing from Elizabeth Burns-Thompson, the executive director of the Modern Ag Alliance, talking about what the latest MAHA Commission's report is and means to agriculture and more. So here we are, excited to share that with you right now. Excited to have Elizabeth Burns-Thompson on the podcast with us, the executive director of the Modern Ag Alliance. EBT, it's great to have you back on the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Welcome to the news week of updates. I'm excited to talk a lot about the MAHA Commission's report. But first of all, what have you been seeing in the Modern Ag Alliance phase as to things you've been working on lately?
Yeah, and I think maybe just to take a step back even further for those that may have missed our interviews before and may not be familiar with the organization, and rightfully so, Modern Ag itself is a new entity. So we're coming on just about a year and a half old. We're unique in our structure in that we're an association of associations, for lack of a better term, but organizations that many of us and your listeners are familiar with, commodity groups, state farm bureaus, ag retail organizations from coast to coast. So we work on issues that are not region specific or commodity specific, but really a broad range of organizations that have come together with one really sole mission or perspective, which is to ensure that farmers continue to have access to those critical crop protection tools. And when I'm saying that, our audiences know that I'm talking about pesticides, so the herbicides, insecticides, and the like that we depend upon each and every year to bring in the crop each year. So we do work all across the country, really from coast to coast. We've had an exciting first. I'm looking at my calendar here, 9 months that I've been on the roll here. So a lot of exciting things to talk about.
The latest MAHA Commission report was just released last week. Of course, we heard a lot of positive responses from agriculture groups. What did you really hear and think about that report?
Sure. And what I found too is we can get in the weeds on acronyms MAHA. So for those that are not familiar, MAHA being the Make America Healthy Again initiative, just to take even a further step back on that, an initiative that was put forward by the administration, a cross collaboration between the United States EPA, USDA, as well as HHS, collectively looking at kind of health factors in our next generation or the children across this country. Unfortunately, earlier this year, we got the first wave of their report, or their first report that really drew some challenging conclusions for production agriculture, especially with the dialogue that was included in there about pesticides specifically, going so far as to call out even specific active ingredients as points of concern. I will say now that we've gotten the second report finally released by the administration, I feel like the voice of the American farmer really was heard. So I will give kudos where credit's due. And I do think that they spend some time going out and truly figuring out what we do in production agriculture, how we do it, and why we do it. I will say that there's still some pieces in there that give me a little concern when they question or look towards, questions around what is gold standard science or real world data. I would argue that the process that we have in this country truly is the gold standard when you compare it to processes around the world. The depth and due diligence that our administrative agencies take, ensuring that the products that we are using on farms, are safe, and that can give reassurance to consumers that are ultimately depending on that food and fiber and fuel at the end of the day.
So did that report include an emphasis or a focus on technology to help verify some of those things you're concerned about?
Yeah, we saw that definitely lean into some technology on, encouraging even more precision tech. We all know that all of that comes with a cost as well. As much as all of us would like, the brand new bright and shiny technology straight off the lot, much of that is cost prohibitive, especially in today's economic climate. And so I think it does recognize that it's not just the efficacy of the tools itself, but also partnered with technologies that are utilized as part of that. So, precision when it comes to spraying technology and other types of practices in agriculture are part of the bigger picture. And I think that is a testament to the administration and all of the organizations that were part of that commission, taking a bigger picture look and a broader understanding of what modern day agriculture is. Us on this, as well as your listeners, I think sometimes we take for granted that, we came up and around, production ag. So we know what it's like to put in a crop each spring. We know what it's like to take out a crop each fall, and we know how we do things and why we do things. And that's something that there's a lot of folks, in our nation's capital and our state capitals that are making critical policy decisions that just don't have, the benefit of having been around that. So it's not intuitive to them. So I would leave this as a call to action also for farmers that are listening, that, we've been talking about it for a decade plus that I've been in this space, how important it is for farmers to tell their story. And that couldn't be as more true today as it was, before.
Now, it's a 73-page report. Take some of those takeaways that you had as a group and share with farmer listeners that maybe haven't read the full report.
Sure. So, at a high level, the second report was much shorter than the first one we got earlier this spring. We knew that was likely to be the case, as the first one was meant to be a bit more analytical about what are some of the drivers, that they identified to some of our healthcare epidemic, that we have in this country, especially with the next generation. The second wave, or what we've now seen in the second report, meaning, tactics. So what do we do about it? What do we strategy moving forward. And so I think that's, as Tanner mentioned, going into what are real world next steps. And so looking at where precision technology can come into play. And it does recognize to a certain extent that we have a robust regulatory process that can provide those assurances for consumers that, when farmers are utilizing these tools as part of a production practice in a growing season, that is safe and it's resulting in a safe product when they go to the grocery store each day. Excuse me. I think along that, just to further bridge, we're continuing to work out in DC on a variety of things and, continuing to provide some clarity and consistency around pesticide labeling, which is, the key part of the regulatory process around pesticides. And so, we've not taken our foot off the gas as it relates to some of that outreach activity in DC.
I always applaud and appreciate those that go through these reports because I can't remember the last time I read a 73-page book, let alone a 73-page report. So I appreciate those high-level synopses of what's included. What do you think this means for the future? What's this going to do for your role in the team at Modern Ag Alliance to help make sure that the next steps are achieved?
Sure. So, I think that while this was a federal commission done with federal agencies at a federal level, a lot of what we work on at Modern Ag is at the state level. So I spend, a good chunk of the first chunk of my time with Modern Ag in state capitals, really all across the country, working on state policy initiatives. I do think that come, the first part of 2026, we're going to see a lot of conversation about MAHA in state legislation. And so it is incredibly important to not only be talking to your federal members of Congress, but exceptionally even more so your state house and state senate individuals, because there's a growing conversation, a growing movement to look at tactics and ways where MAHA-based policy initiatives can find their way into state capitals. And no discredit to the initiative. I think the underlying goal of making the general public healthier, taking steps towards that is important, and something I think we can all agree to. It's some of those tactics that are attached to that I think could raise some questions for production ag. We saw that transpired a little bit earlier this year with some initiatives that were put forward in a few southern states that would have changed the way that food labels are made up in relation to critical chemistries like glyphosate or atrazine and others that may have necessarily need to have been part of a food product label, which we would argue goes a step too far. That is not a food ingredient by any means. And so I am a bit concerned about what we will see at the state level moving forward. But again, that's something that our team and our initiative is gearing up for. We've played quite a bit of offense in terms of putting forward some legislative solutions for existing problems that we were looking to solve. But I think we'll also be playing some defense in places where we'll need to explain processes and do our due diligence with state lawmakers.
As you talk about your role is in part at the state capitol level, what is some of that legislation that you have been really watching these past few months and engaging in?
Sure. So most of the state legislative bodies across the country have concluded for 2025, but conversations are already starting for what does 2026 look like. And so, we will continue in some certain states where we have started some of those legislative endeavors. So we were able and very pleased to share that, we got a couple of the bills we were working on this year across the finish line, most notably up in North Dakota, as well as down in Georgia. And those bills were signed into law here earlier this summer that provides some of that consistency and clarity around the labeling process or recognition of the EPA process at the state level. So we'll continue to work on some of that in a handful of states here going into 2026 in conjunction with the federal initiative, which I would be remiss to not mention, in large part because we are in the heat of both timelines and deadlines on federal government funding, as well as, a deadline for the Farm Bill yet again. It's a bit of a Groundhog Day effect, but we are still yet here again talking about Farm Bill process and Farm Bill deadlines. We are fortunate that G.T. Thompson, or the chairman of the House Ag Committee, has said that labeling clarity, specifically pesticide labeling clarity, is one of his top 3 priorities for Skinny Farm Bill or Farm Bill 2.0. And so that is very positive for us. And we're going to continue to make sure that, members of Congress recognize the importance of that as part of, if the wheels begin turning again on a farm bill conversation yet this year.
Well, I was just looking at the Modern Ag Alliance website, modernagalliance.org, and it looks like there's a great way to keep up on a lot of these things that we've discussed here on the interview today. How best, Elizabeth, do you suggest listeners keep tabs on things, or if they want to support, do that?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, thank you for that plug. Our team spends a lot of time on the website and in our outreach materials. So modernagalliance.org. We have a wealth of resources, a way to keep in touch with us, as well as a portal for you to very easily send a letter to your elected officials. And that's, federal level, state level, to make sure that they're hearing that constant drumbeat of the importance of these tools and critical chemistries. And then from there, we'll make sure we keep in touch with you once you share your information. We also have an incredible online social media presence, so please encourage folks to follow along with us there as well. And we're also been out and about at many of the farm shows throughout the summer months, and hopefully in partnership with many of the organizations that farmers are members of or part of as part of our membership as well.
Well, we always appreciate it when you can jump on and share your insights with our audience. It's been much appreciated again. Can't wait to do it until next time. So thanks for being a part of the show, listeners. That was a great interview to share with you.
Well, thanks for Elizabeth for joining us on this week's podcast. But as we look at the fertilizer news, prices are climbing again, though they haven't hit the record highs seen in 2022. Faith Brom, an economist with the American Farm Bureau Federation, says products like phosphates are seeing notable increases, with markets showing significant volatility. In Illinois, USDA data and University of Illinois Farm Doc analysis show prices are 6% to 20% higher than early fall 2024. High yields mean more nutrients were removed from the soil, and replacing them for next year's crop will come even at a higher cost, they predict. Parham points to two main factors driving costs: energy prices, particularly for nitrogen fertilizers that rely on natural gas, and geopolitical disruptions affecting global production. She advises producers to monitor the market closely and remain flexible, stating being aware and planning for this volatility will help manage input costs across the board, she says. Lawmakers are also taking notice. Senators Chuck Grassley, a Republican in Iowa, and Tammy Baldwin, Democrat in Wisconsin, and Joni Ernst, Republican also in Iowa, have reintroduced bipartisan legislation, the Fertilizer Research Act, to address soaring fertilizer costs. The bill would direct the USDA to study competition and pricing trends in the fertilizer market and issue a public report within a year examining factors like market concentration, import reliance, tariffs, and emerging fertilizer technologies. But Tanner, what happened last week here in the markets as a WASDE report came out?
That's right. Just a couple of high-level things since Delaney is missing on us this week. It did come out last Friday, and that WASDE report included farm surveys that had soybean pod counts and corn ear weights. For the 2025-2026 marketing year, the U.S. ending stocks were reported at, for corn, 2.11 billion bushels, which was nearly unchanged from the 2.117 billion last month, but above the 2.011 billion that the trade estimate had put together. Soybeans came in at 300 million bushels, up from 290 million last month. And that's above the 288, which traders had expected as well. When you look at the Ohio Country Journal, they reported after this being released that corn was down a penny, soybeans were up 3 cents, and wheat was down 4 cents. Prior to that noon report, corn was up 4 cents, soybeans were up 8, and wheat was down 2. So interesting to see where that all came about. And just as of close yesterday, December corn was down 3 cents, closing at $4.2375. March corn was down 3 cents as well, closing at $4.4125. Soybeans were also down 4 3/4 cents to $10.39 for the November contract. January also down, closing 4 cents lower. So not a lot of great news as we come into harvest season here, markets wise, Michelle. But hopefully we have more headlines to share with them next week and great stories to continue to include. So listeners, as always, we appreciate you tuning in, hanging out with us, hanging out with Michelle and I this week for sure. We'll be back again next week with more headlines. Right, Michelle?
Yeah, we're always trying to share what's happening in agriculture, how it's impacting especially corn and soybean producers, cattle producers, dairy producers. So just a lot of information. But like I mentioned, we're here in September. What's the fall looking like for you?
Yeah, hopefully we've been getting some of this rain that was discussed earlier in that weather side of things. Hopefully harvest moves and progresses as scheduled. So listeners, maybe get you some field reports as the season goes along. But for today, what do you say? Should we let them go?
Let's let them go.